It has just been announced that Doublelift, former AD carry of TSM last season and obviously CLG before that, will be standing in or will be a temporary addition to Team Liquid for the rest of the summer and will become effective immediately the starting AD carry of the team. Now, this was cited in the announcement by Team Liquid themselves as a temporary solution to finish out the split. Team Liquid is obviously in dire straits right now. They're a team that is tied for bottom of the LCS. They've won 3 series and lost 9. They're 12 wins and 20 losses in terms of individual games. The only teams they've beaten in series were CLG, Immortals, and Echo Fox, who are the 5th, 6th, and 7th best teams in the LCS. So they're not getting wins off top competitors. And we saw recently with the drastic roster move they made of they'd obviously had some switch-ups around the mid lane where they had Golden Glue, but then they had Link was potentially going to come back in because obviously Phoenix had left at the end of last season. And they decided actually to take Piglet, their AD carry for a long time now, put him as the mid laner because he plays mid lane champions in solo queue, and have a guy called Young Bin come in, I believe from the collegiate scene, and become the starting AD carry. Now, that didn't really work out when you looked at how it played out. His play didn't look that good. And, I mean, obviously, first experience of the LCS. And Team Liquid as a team still looked pretty bad. I mean, Piglet himself actually had moments where he looked pretty good, but that alone is not going to be enough. So, bringing in Doublelift potentially gives them a chance to escape relegation, stay in LCS. It's just a temporary solution, just a lifeline to try and stay alive. So, what's interesting is, I actually was able to speak to Reginald about this, the owner of TSM, and get his insight on what happened and the chronology of it and what his thoughts were on all this. So here's what I can tell you based on what he told me. This is from Reginald's version of things. So Doublelift wanted to come back to TSM already in the spring. He was looking at potentially joining again, inquiring if he could come and play with the team again. But TSM looked at the current lineup they had with Wild Turtle as the starting AD carry, and they made a decision that Wild Turtle's doing fine, like there's no issues here where we'd have to kick him necessarily. So whether or not Doublelift's the better player or not is irrelevant to the scenario. They thought, we'll just stick with Wild Turtle for now. The plan was always Doublelift try and come back for the summer anyway, so we're going to stay with that team because they thought Wild Turtle was doing fine. TSM was fine with Doublelift still wanting to play in the spring split and going out there and trying to find other teams that might want to pick him up to play for him. He got the deal done with Team Liquid very quickly. Like they were desperate for someone. If you look at their recent roster move, and he's a massive upgrade over who they had. And even as a temporary short-term solution, it's pretty good for them. Like I say, as a lifeline to potentially save them and keep them in LCS. So TSM released him from his contract, allowed him to sign with Team Liquid because that's the way apparently Riot does things. You can't just loan a player to the team. I guess that's logical if you think about it, because actually you could have a conflict of interest there, right? Where if Team Liquid gets in the playoffs in the last place and you play Team TSM, then you just tell the guy on loan, you're going to lose this game or not play for them. That would be pretty fucked. So TSM released him from his contract, Doublelift signed with Team Liquid, and the plan is still very much from TSM and Doublelift's side that Doublelift will come back to TSM during the summer and he will compete to become the starting AD carry of that team with Wild Turtle, assuming nothing goes drastically wrong with Wild Turtle. It's not that he will join Team Liquid, regardless of the outcome of this particular foray into the spring split now. Now, in the TSM post about it themselves, they even say, what Reginald says, we will happily give him a fair tryout for the summer split. The goal is to have the best possible roster at Worlds, and having Double as a potential 6th man would only help our endeavor at Worlds 2017. It is good that he's getting practice now, and hopefully it will not be a large shift for him when he comes back. Now, Doublelift in the post on Team Solo Mid said, during my break, I realized that playing competitively is my calling, and although I didn't intend to come back before summer split, an opportunity came up for me to return to the pro play earlier. My time on Team Liquid will help me ease back into the competitive environment and prepare for my tryout with TSM in the summer. So you'll note even Doublelift's using this terminology that it's a tryout and that he'll be coming back in that sense. So okay, that's the end of the Doublelift Reginald part. Now, here's my thoughts on it. So first and foremost, Doublelift for me, I actually considered him the MVP of the league. I can't remember if it was actually an article or a video. I think it might be in a video where I explained that I thought he was the MVP of the league. last split, not Bjergsen. I actually thought he outclassed his position more, and I thought in terms of what he brought to the team, in terms of shoring up the mid-game, it was a lot more. He always smashed lane. It was fine. He had a rookie support who I thought he carried in some senses and really made that guy look a lot better than I actually think he was, and that's one of the reasons I didn't rate Biofrost as highly, and I think that's going to be borne out this season, that he's not quite ready to be this elite level support player that people made out. And Bjergsen was very good and always has been, but I actually felt like that season, Bjergsen was just a really good mid laner, probably the best mid laner in NA, but he wasn't for me the MVP. Doublelift was. So when Doublelift left, I certainly had my questions about TSM. How are they going to do? Now, I still thought they'd be a top 2, top 3 team. They have so much talent elsewhere in the lineup, and it seems like in general the coaching staff is pretty solid around them. But you saw when Doublelift left and TSM came into this split, listen, they've still been very good, but they're not a dominant force now. I mean, the shot calling clearly has taken a hit. I've never bought this notion that Doublelift was some monster shot caller, but I certainly think when you consider what a headstrong person he is, and the fact that given enough years playing the AD carry role and playing with the very intelligent people like Chauster, Afromu, playing under good coaches, I think he did get to the point where he understood, this is a key concept that someone like Forgiven understood, is it's not about whether you could be the shot caller of the whole game, but you learn, especially from hard carrying teams that aren't that good, eventually how to take your advantage, which is consistently in their case in lane, being mega at that. You take your advantages there, and then you learn how to transfer them to the rest of the team. And your contribution to the shot calling and the overall team approach is what's going to make the mid-game macro a lot better, how you transition out of lane into objectives and moving around the map. And it's also going to make it everyone else who's doing shot calling, etc., it's going to help them out a lot more. They're going to know that information comes from you is decisive, that you know what you're talking about. They can kind of give you autonomy in that particular sense, delegate out some of the responsibility of that element of the shot calling to you, and know that they don't have to kind of think for you. It's not a scenario like a high scenario in the past where he has to make a lot of the calls for you. I also think if you look this season, Wild Turtle simply doesn't smash lane in the way that Doublelift did. I think, as you've seen, Biofrost has suffered. He's still pretty solid, but he is certainly not the player he looked like he was last split, where people wanted him to be all LCS. I mean, I thought that was ridiculous, quite frankly. Also, I think you can see Svenskeren has suffered. Svenskeren was having one of the best splits of his career last year heading into Worlds. But again, when you consider the shot calling setup in the team and some of the decision making, a good thing about Doublelift, a negative when he's in a team where it doesn't work, it's dysfunctional, is that he is very demanding and he's very decisive. So he's going to tell his jungler when he wants him to come. He's going to tell him in what scenarios he wants him there. Now, that's all great stuff for a jungler. Junglers in general actually want their lanes telling them and giving them information and making calls on them. Now, sure, it can go too far, like the Piglet Dardoch situation, but overall, that's what a jungler would rather than the jungler having to be talking constantly and looking at all his lanes constantly. Like, I don't think even people like Dandy and Kakao were ever really just them controlling everything. And they were controlling a lot of it, but I think they were getting good info from their teammates, and their teammates knew how to use them, essentially. So Doublelift went off and he decided, like, I'm going to be a streamer for the spring split. Spring split doesn't matter. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, when you're as good as he was, like I said, for me, league MVP, yeah, you probably can take a split out and know that, you can come back and people are going to give you a shot in that particular sense. But I actually never bought the idea he was just going to go and be a streamer fully anyway, and that he'd ever take to that life and just do it the whole time. Because that's the thing with Doublelift, okay? He could have done this a long time ago, being a streamer. He could have done many other things in esports. Could have probably been a desk host he could have been a desk analyst for the last few seasons if he wanted to. I'm pretty sure in terms of marketability, he could pull all these things off. But for someone like Doublelift, I think they are drawn to competition and getting to try and prove they're the best. And I think when they're out there streaming and then they see what's going on in the league and they see players playing there and they see players they think they're better than doing well and succeeding, and they think, whoa, could I help that team out? Could I do something there? I think the itch is scratched again, and the key is when you're not fully out of it. If you're totally out of it and you've been gone a few years and maybe you retired because you weren't doing very well, yeah, your road back is going to be so difficult, it's going to require so much more effort probably than even when you were at the top, that it probably isn't worth it. But if you are, as I said, essentially you just stepped out of the game as the league MVP, for me, and then you look at all these teams, questionable AD carries, including arguably your own team, Team Solomon. They're okay, but that's because Wild Turtle fits the meta at the moment. Not so because Wild Turtle's some fantastic player. You look at that and you go, yeah, maybe I want to get back into this. So can I come back? I can see why that would happen. Now, for me, there's a lot of issues going forwards here. So first and foremost, if he's going to just try out for the 6th spot, and he's going to, we're going to see who the starting AD carry is. Like, unless Doublelift exhibits some really ridiculous ego/personality problems, or the meta is just drastically and quite specifically set so that for some weird reason, it would benefit them more to have Wild Turtle play almost like clean-up AD carry style. I don't really see a world in which Wild Turtle can beat Doublelift for the AD carry spot, because as an AD carry, take out all team factors, take out every other aspect of being a teammate and being coachable, I think Doublelift is a significantly better AD carry than Wild Turtle, and has shown season to season that he can maintain that in a way that Wild Turtle hasn't. And Wild Turtle is radically up and down depending on who his support is, what his team's like, what the coaching's like, what the meta is like. So the issues, though, is, yes, Doublelift absolutely significantly better than Wild Turtle as an AD carry, but significantly less coachable. Wild Turtle's personality, his demeanor, seems very coachable. Now, not 100% coachable in as much as I don't think he's a super cerebral player, a very intelligent player. Therefore, I don't know how much he takes in, but he certainly seems like he does what he's told. Seems like he tries to take on board what people think. Certainly seems like he takes direction in the game. These are all areas where Doublelift, it's been problematic. Like, I actually think part of the reason why it worked out for Doublelift in TSM is because aside from that first spring split regular season of season 6, the team was just doing so well, and they were so good, and he had so many other good players at other positions, Sven Skaren, Bjergsen, that it's hard for him to really rage at them or to call them out or to just, it's them that's failing. He has to just kind of look at himself and go, oh, okay, I've got things to work on still, and we've got to change the coaching staff and get a new support. Yeah, okay, but when you're just winning all the time, like in the summer, then it's not going to be as much of an issue as being coachable, etc. There's not a lot to coach at that point in time. Things are going fantastically. They're working. You're just maintaining it, and everyone's happy because you're winning. I do think that in general, the interesting thing going forwards, if Doublelift will rejoin TSM, is that he has actually shown himself to be meta-dependent. Only in as much as, for whatever reason, it seems like, depending on the meta, that just decides how effective Doublelift's going to be once you get to the international level, and that's the key to me. Like in NA, he can play anything, and I think he would smash anywhere and be very good. With that, I mean, obviously his personality is that he won't just play anything, but okay, let's imagine that I could force him to pick these champions and play properly. But the issue for me is once he goes up to the higher level, to some degree, I think he's kind of a microcosm of the problem NA often faces with their top teams, not just top players, which is that he's so good in NA that he can play stuff that will that actually work, or will that style actually work when you get to the international level and you play the best AD carries in the world? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. Because actually, you can see why TSM might not want to just say, yeah, you can come back in the summer, we'll definitely sign you, because they don't know what the meta is going to be. Like, look at the meta right now. The meta right now for AD carry is Jhin, Varus, Ashe, and then you get the odd game of Ezreal being played. Now, okay, sure, Doublelift played a little bit of Ashe in the summer split last year. He barely played Jhin. He only played it in the playoffs, and again, only against NA and on a fantastic team. Therefore, it's hard to judge that he was one of the best Jhins in the world. You don't really look at him and say this is going to be like a Varus, Ashe, Jhin player all the time. And when he got to Worlds, his big pick obviously was Lucian, and he tried to play it, and it betrayed him. This was the pick that he lost 2 games on. It was a crucial pick that did not work out for him and didn't work on the international level for him. And interestingly enough, that's because the meta had changed so much by Worlds that the champion was only picked 13 times total at Worlds. 2 of those were by Doublelift. So he almost had a sixth of the picks of Jhin at the entire tournament. That wasn't what people were playing. And yet he tried to stick with it, tried to brute force it, and it didn't work for him overall. Now, in that world, if things are going well enough in TSM, I can see why they at least want the option to have Wild Turtle come in and potentially play whatever the meta is at that point in time, and maybe have both at the same time and then say, hey, let's see what happens. Let's see if the meta changes at some point, or a pick comes in at Worlds that one of them's better at playing. I think that's a great option by TSM. Even though I think Doublelift absolutely should be playing in the team again, I can see why you at least want that option. It also keeps Doublelift on the straight and narrow, trying to actually professionally try to get back in the team, not just knowing that his spot's guaranteed and he can waltz in into a totally different potential coaching environment and a situation where players have been playing without him for months and months and think that he's just going to be the king of the hill and he's going to tell everyone how it is. No, he has to get his way back in the team. This is almost a more Korean approach. I kind of like this in a sense. Well, in terms of Team Liquid, the Young Bin move, admittedly, he hadn't had much time to play, but didn't look good, put it that way. I mean, the fact that he was forcing Ezreal all the time, I don't really think that kind of was concerning to me as it was. Piglet to mid is good. I think that's a better, when you consider their options were Link and Golden Glue, who clearly, I mean, those just weren't working out as moves. They weren't good enough. They weren't set for the team. I also don't know if they have the personality to be in a team like this, because I actually think you need someone who has like a carry mentality on Team Liquid at the moment. They've got so many issues with that as a team. And that's one thing I always respected about Piglet. Win or lose, he would play in a manner where it seemed like he did try his best all the time they played. Barring that one where he potentially did like that dodgy pick that might have been complete bullshit and tried to fuck with the team. But barring that one. So I actually think that the Piglet move was good. The Youngwin one wasn't very good. And so I think actually the key for me with this team is going to be how the relationship between Reignover and Doublelift develops. Because I can already see a gank issue here, which is that Piglet, the word behind the scenes whenever I talked to Piglet's past teammates was always that he is one of the most demanding AD carries on his jungler. Like, he is the guy... Okay, so you know the joke on Summoning Insight that we had that Jankos told, which is that it's not that Forgiven demands the jungler be there all the time. He would even demand that the jungler not be there if he thought he could just survive a 2v3, because then he felt like it was a waste that the jungler wasn't getting more farm, wasn't doing something else on another part of the map. No, Piglet is that prototypical AD carry who's like, jungler, I'm going to push the lane constantly. You better be there whenever anyone attempts to gank me, and you better be there to get a gank and kill onto this guy if they're ever going to go all in on me. He really is that guy. So that's an issue right there, because as a mid laner, I mean, we saw when Incarnation, now called Jensen, came into Cloud9, that was a big issue in Season 5, was this guy was looking at the team, and Meteos wasn't playing like a super mid-centric jungle style where he's constantly taking care of you and babysitting you and warding everything up. No, he's expecting you to just play a safer style, play off the mid and play at times risky, and then he's going to come every now and then. That wasn't working, and it made the Incarnation not comfortable. So I could see Piglet being very demanding of Reignover, and you've got to add in, Reignover is Korean. And so Reignover, I think, is going to know which way his bread's buttered, and he's got to deal with Piglet, and he's got to make sure that Piglet's happy in this team, and they're both Korean. So if they're talking to each other privately, there's an extra kind of dynamic and team relationship being formed there that it doesn't really work the same way with the others outside of the team. Now, the reason why that's an issue is precisely because it's Doublelift. Doublelift's also someone who, especially in a team like this that doesn't have people smashing all the other lanes, is going to want someone to be ganking his lane a lot. He's going to want a lot of attention on the bot lane. We've seen that when he was in CLG. That was continually a problem that they had over there. Was he's very demanding in that sense. Like, he'd play the team concept when it was working, then when it wasn't, he basically reverted back to like, I want you to protect the Doublelift. I mean, he always presented it like, oh, I never wanted to play that style, man. But they used to just revert back to it. It's like, I think it was a bit of both. Like, to him, I can see why it might seem like they were like, everyone's being indecisive, shot calling's gone to shit, Link's failing, whatever it might be. Skara, the coach, Monty, they can't control the team. So then he's like, oh, these guys can't do anything. They need someone to step forwards. I'll do that. Therefore, it's going to be my way. I could see how that might be. It might be a bit of both at the same time. But he certainly was very demanding, except for the few times when Team Liquid was doing, when CLG was doing very well. So I see an issue potentially there in terms of how you split Reignover up between mid lane and AD carry. At which point, where does that leave Lolo? Now, I've already made this point in the past. I think Lolo's super overrated. I think he's an okay player. I think he's an average to below average top laner in an ALCS. And I also think that he just got boosted by the fact that when things went to shit in Team Liquid, Dardoch was like, right, well, you're my mate, at least I'll support your lane. That was about it to me. So when he had focus, he looked like average to above average. But I think overall, the issue I see for him right here is he's just going to have to go back to playing, I think, probably a low econ style, and they're going to have to live in a world where there is no jungler mate. He's already been torn limb from limb by fucking Piglet and Doublelift already. So that's the big issue to me. Then there's the issue that you're playing with Piglet, another very demanding, another very headstrong person, but someone who doesn't have fantastic English. So I could already see arguments happening there. Now, there's also another world in which both of them could do kind of the movie anime plot line of like, well, we're both the guys who hard carry teams on our own and are stubborn and think we can succeed. So like, let's team up and you carry and I'll carry and let's just smash all these fucks and let's not care about all the past. And, you know, we're the guys that no one wants to see win and we'll win anyway. I could see that happening too. But the problem is when people who have those personalities ever clash, it's going to be monumental. Now, the coachability aspect is a big issue. Doublelift hasn't necessarily shown himself to be that coachable. Like, he's someone who's certainly coachable to a point, and I'm sure over the years he's matured and he's improved in this respect, but I don't think Team Liquid's coaching has been very good, quite frankly, for the last year and a half. So I actually see that being an issue. Like, I think one upside is that St. Vicious is there as an assistant coach, because I do think St. Vicious has the authority and has the mentality to be able to take Doublelift aside, knows him as a person, potentially get through to him in some sense. I think that could help. That could be a key for Team Liquid. So, okay, the big thing about this move is if we hadn't talked to Reginald, and even because remember, just people saying statements in a press release doesn't make them true. And by the way, Reginald telling me this stuff doesn't make it true. It's just what he told me, his insights. It would be very easy to speculate, but since technically Doublelift is signed with Team Liquid and he's technically not under contract with TSM, if he wants to, he could just join Team Liquid permanently, right? The problem with that is it seems very unlikely on all grounds. Like, first of all, let's say Team Liquid is really successful. Let's say they make the final of LCS. I mean, I'm not going to say they can fucking win the LCS. That seems ridiculous at this point in time. But let's say they had a crazy run and they made the final somehow. Now, even in that world, odds are the other team facing them in the final might be TSM, or TSM's going to at least make the semis themselves. So the odds are it would still be worth going over to TSM, making them even stronger, and then having a team that can be a contender for Worlds again. So unlikely you'd stay with Team Liquid. I mean, also, the information I gave you before from Reginald literally says that he wanted to be back in TSM. If it was up to him, he'd be on TSM right now rather than Wild Turtle. He wouldn't be in Team Liquid right now. Therefore, I think he still wants to go back. And if you look at his history and some of the CLG lineups he was on in the past, some of those were a train wreck. So I don't think he wants to go into a bad team situation and then stay there and then build something up. You know, he hasn't, who knows how many more years he wants to play in his career. I think he wants success now, and he wants more success now, and he wants to play at Worlds. So it's too risky to go elsewhere. So I don't think there's actually any drama overall here that can potentially develop. I do think an interesting side plot that people probably missed is the very fact that TSM's letting this happen. TSM's letting him be released and then go to Team Liquid. Because if you know that whole Three Kings scenario that Richard's often referenced, where you have Reginald, you have Jack, and you have Liquid 112, Steve Arneset, the Team Liquid, the TSM, Cloud9, and Team Liquid owners. They've always grouped together. They've always formed like an affinity group or a power base. I mean, someone could call it a cartel, whatever you want to call it. They've always formed this group that certainly acted in their own shared interests, and they very rarely have ever gone against each other. You'd be very hard-pressed to find real instances that look like they've ever screwed each other over and gone against each other in that sense. And they all seem to work with like similar sponsors and do business in a similar way and have a similar philosophy. When you consider this, the fact that TSM's letting what for me was the league MVP last split go to Team Liquid certainly suggests that this is almost like a personal favor. Like, you know what? Okay, Steve, you can have Doublelift to save you from getting relegated from LCS, and then he's just going to come back to my team anyway. You know that, right? You're not going to keep it at this point in time. That's not going to happen. I mean, my question is this. If Doublelift had gone out and he'd wanted to find another team, and for some reason, right, obviously this is very unlikely it would happen if you look at the personalities in this team, but let's say FlyQuest goes, you know what, Doublelift, join our team, mate. We'll win LCS, we'll go to Worlds, and we'll be an even better team than TSM. And you know what? We've got a load of investment money. Here's a fuck ton of money as well. Would TSM have let him go to FlyQuest in that scenario? The team that doesn't have a Three Kings owner isn't necessarily aligned with their best interests, isn't a VC company coming in with all this money and investment, etc., and flashing it around, and potentially as a result are like an enemy to TSM. That's the interesting question. I suspect no. I suspect that's where we might have got some drama, and that's where Doublelift maybe could have used leverage and forced his hand and see if he could get back in TSM. It's all interesting. The point is, unfortunately, the reason there's no drama, the reason why it's all kind of moot, is because Doublelift is so good, and he will be when the summer comes, and World Turtle isn't going to be able to live up to that, and the meta will become, at some point in time, there'll be more dominant AD carry champions, I think. And as a result, I think you will see TSM with Doublelift eventually. I think he can probably save Team Liquid. That's about it. There's no real reason to stay in that fucking house fire. And I think going forwards, we will have the lineup of last year reunited for TSM. Now, even though people are joking on Twitter, sadly, it's very likely you're going to get a Breaking Point type documentary, even if it goes to shit. But it certainly would be awesome, because obviously Doublelift is the original Breaking Point, right? Isn't he? If you consider the fucking Dunzo manifesto and all the interviews of people saying stuff about Doublelift, I actually have an interview coming soon where some of this will be addressed from within CLG of some of Doublelift's time. So that's something to look out for, right?